So there's only 5 days left until Deep Dive is over, and I've noticed that a lot of you guys are starting to do your rank map attempts. This video will basically explain all the mechanics of the rank map and what are the, I guess, ideal conditions, and basically how to get a high score. So, unlike Arctic Warfare, where it's pretty obvious where the enemies are going to spawn from, on this map, it's not so obvious. All the helipads are accessible to you, so if you didn't know what you were doing, you might have just kind of completely capturing all the enemy helipads. There's nothing spawning, you don't get any points. So basically these 10 helipads are the ones that will spawn enemies on the end of every turn. Now they don't always spawn an enemy. I find that of the 10 helipads, there's usually around 7 to 10 enemies that will spawn. And then on top of that, there are turn-dependent enemy spawn helipads. So these two in the middle will spawn enemies at the end of turn 4, 9, and 14. And then these three, this one, and this one, will spawn enemies at the end of turn 2, 5, 8, 11, and 14. So you gotta make sure that before you end turn on those turns, that those helipads are clear, so that you get more enemy spawns. And then for the ones that are in the middle, the turn-dependent ones in the middle, make sure that you are protecting your helipads right next to the HQ, so that you don't end up losing your helipads in the process. Now for ideal conditions, what's worth restarting the map for would be getting a lot of enemies to spawn. So I mentioned that on turn 2, these 3 helipads will end up spawning an enemy. So when I end turn, the most ideal thing to happen would be that these scouts next to these helipads won't cover them, because if they do, I don't have any points. I don't have enough action points to go fight them. So what I want is for these scouts to move away and not cover the helipads. So I'm going to do that. So we end up having 2 of the helipads covered, and only one of them is left open. So the most ideal condition would be that at the end of turn 1, these scouts do not cover these helipads. That way we can ensure that we get more enemies to spawn. Another thing is, on end of turn 1, I noticed that you're very likely to get very few enemy spawns from the normal enemy helipads. I've gotten as low as only 4 enemies spawning, which is unusual. You generally, like I mentioned before, you generally get 7 to 10. But on the first turn, I've gotten as low as 4, and the highest I think I've gotten is 7. But yeah, the most ideal condition for the ending first turn and starting second turn would be that none of the 3 turn-dependent helipads are covered, and that you get a high number of spawns from the regular enemy helipads. So that's it for enemy spawns, for regular enemy spawns. I find that generally by turn 6, I'm able to have complete map control, as in I can make sure that all the enemy helipads are completely clear for the next wave of spawns. I recommend keeping that as sort of your baseline, I guess, to know that you're doing a good run. For the boss spawn mechanic, you have to reach a certain kill threshold. Once you reach that threshold, and then you end turn, the boss will spawn. So the first threshold is 5 kills. I'm gonna get that now, and then show you how the boss will spawn. So I've reached 5 kills. I've actually reached 6. I've gone 1 over, but that's fine. If I were to end turn now, I would end up spawning a boss from one of the boss helipads. So you can watch that happen. I end turn. So yes, now we can see that Scarecrow has spawned from the upper right boss helipad. Now that she's spawned, the next threshold would be 10 kills. So what I need to do for the next boss to spawn is to reach 10 kills and then end turn. I don't need to kill Scarecrow first to have the next boss spawn. I can have more than one boss on the map at the same time. They will just spawn one at a time. This means that you have to make sure that you are only reaching one threshold per turn. Let's say for example, the next kill threshold is 10 kills, and then the kill threshold after that is 20 kills. So let's say I reach 10, but I don't end turn. I get more kills, and I end up getting 20 kills. So I've reached the next threshold and the threshold after that. So I've gotten 20 kills, and then I end turn. What would happen is that it would skip boss number 2, and it would go straight to spawning boss number 3, and I'd end up losing the points from that second boss skill. So make sure you are only getting one boss threshold per turn. Now for the first 4 bosses, it's completely random which one will spawn from a certain select pool. So the first 4 bosses, it will be one of Gauger, Alchemist, Scarecrow, Intruder, Hunter, or Executioner. It's totally possible that you could get like Hunter 4 times in a row, but yeah, the first 4 will be a random one of those available bosses. After that, boss 5, 6, 7, 8 will always be, in this order, Architect, Dreamer, Gaia, and Garm. So in total, you'll be ending up fighting 8 bosses. Now, the first 4 bosses are relatively easy. They're probably on the same level as the ones that you fought in Arctic Warfare. You can kill them with a pretty strong, high-level rifle team or an AR team. I don't recommend using MG teams against bosses. But for the ones after that, Architect, Dreamer, and Gaia, and Garm, they are much stronger. So for Architect, Dreamer, and Gaia, I have another video showing how I killed those. I highly recommend using a Taunt Fairy against them with an AR team that contains Contender. It will be far easier, you'll take less damage. For Garm, Garm is special. You need a very unique team to fight Garm, and I'll have a video explaining how that works later. But those are the bosses and how you spawn them. The boss helipads, there are 3 of them, and I mentioned that they will spawn randomly of those 3. If like in this example where Scarecrow is covering one of the boss helipads, there's a chance that the next boss is to spawn from that helipad. And if that's the case, it can't spawn because Scarecrow is covering, so it'll end up being skipped. So you want to make sure that all the boss helipads are clear of any enemies if there is a boss to spawn on the next turn. To make it easier for yourself, you can just straight up capture 2 of the 3 and force all the bosses to spawn from that remaining helipad. Yeah, and that's pretty much how to kill the bosses in this map. So the next thing to explain would be the supply line. So I'm going to restart the map just to have a fresh start on how the supply line works. So before you start the map, you actually don't see a supply line point. You have to start it to actually be able to see or make it show up. So I'm going to start the map, and then you see that the supply line is down here. So I'm going to assign an alphabet to each of the possible supply line locations. So there's 6 in total. So this is A, B, C, D, E, and F, and we have our supply line right now at E. Not all supply line locations are ideal, especially when you are starting. You don't want supply lines to be on point A and F, because if you look at the shortest path that it takes to maintain the supply line, 3 of those points are right next to an enemy helipad. So what that means is that you would need to have 3 T-dolls guarding these nodes to make sure that an enemy doesn't walk in and cut off the supply line. Same case for F, where it's like these 3 are right next to enemy helipads. So A and F are bad locations, especially to start at. The other ones all require just 2 T-dolls, because if you look for point B, only these 2 here are right next to enemy helipads. It's the same case for the rest. Point E is a bit special. It's also not ideal because the supply line location will change on turns 6 and 11, on the start of those turns. So let's say, for example, I secured the supply line, and and then on turn 6, the supply line point changed to F. And then I go move my T-dolls to secure point F. The problem with that is I would end up surrounding this helipad here, and as a result end up capturing it and lose a potential enemy spawn from spawning. So if you end up starting with E, restart. Do not start with point E. If by chance you started with something else and on turn 6 it changed to E, do not take the shortest route to capture it. Take this bottom route to capture point E. This way, if on turn 11 it changes to point F, you don't end up surrounding this helipad. Right. What is the point of maintaining the supply line? Well, every time that you have the supply line maintained, every time that you end turn, you will get a certain amount of points from it. Now I say end turn, you actually get the points right before the next turn starts, so you gotta make sure to protect it from any enemy spawns or like from the enemy turn as well. So let's say that I secure the supply line, and then I end turn. Before the next turn starts, I will get 5,000 points. On the next turn, and I still have the supply line maintained, before the turn starts, I will get 1,250 more points than what I got previously. So previously I got 5,000, then the next turn I will get 6,250. And the turn after that I will get 7,500. Turn after that, I will get 8,750. And then so on, until you reach turn 7. So on the start of turn 7, you will always get, no matter what you had previously, you will always get 10,000. And that pattern will continue after that. So on turn 8, the next turn, you will always get 12,500. And then so on until turn 15. It's only for turns 7 or below, sorry, no, not 7 or below, 6 or below, that the amount you get is dependent on how many points you got before. So to maximize your point gain, capturing the supply line as fast as possible will ensure that you get the most points. I'll show you an example. Alright, now I have established the supply line. So after the enemy turn is over and before my turn starts, I will get 5,000 points. I have 7,109. And then now I have 12,109. So I got 5,000 more points from that supply line. Now, on the next turn, I would end up getting 6,250 points at the start of turn 5. On the turn after that, start of turn 6, I would get 7,500 points. And then on start of turn 7, instead of getting 1,250 more points, I would get 10,000 points. And then on turn 8, it'd be 12,500. So the point gain starting turn 7 is always fixed. Anything before that is dependent on what you had, the point gain before. So for the most ideal condition, for the most ideal scenario for the supply line is that you end up securing the supply line at the start of turn 3. In this case, my first was on turn 4. So what would happen is I end up missing out on the 8,750 point gain. So here, this is actually only possible with the parachute fairy as well. You need at least one to be able to do this. And this is generally for this to work properly. Generally, it's good to have the supply line start in A, B, C, or D, because it's right next to an available helipad, like the neutral helipads here that you can actually just straight up take. Of course, location A is not good because, well, it takes 3 to secure, so B, C, or D are fine. So right now I got it spawned in D, which is nice. Yeah, so I'll show what happens when you capture the supply line on turn 2 and then on the start of turn 3, before turn 3 starts, I'll end up getting 5,000. So this is basically the fastest way to secure the supply line. And so when I end turn, and once all the enemy battles are over, we have 3,918. Now there's the plus 5,000. So it happened on turn 3 this time. Before you saw that it happened on turn 4. And what that basically means that the first secure will always be 5,000 as long as it's before turn 7. And then every turn following will be 1,250 points more than that. So by turn 6, on the start of turn 6, I'll end up getting 8,750 points. And then on turn 7 I'll get 10,000 points. So what this means is with Parachute Fairy you can get an extra 8,750 that without you would end up skipping. Yeah, so that's pretty much the basics that you need to know to get a decent score for Deep Dive. Sorry I couldn't go into more detail regarding the map. There's just not enough time for me to explain everything. But I hope that helps, and yeah, good luck.